10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
It's T plus 40 seconds, and we've just had liftoff of our Falcon 9 vehicle, taking our Starlink payload to its targeted deployment orbit. We are now throttling down and throttling back up in preparation for max Q, which is coming up here in about 10 seconds or so. Max Q is the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle sees throughout ascent, so it's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see. Should hear that call out in about 5 seconds.
Maximum aerodynamic pressure.
And there's that call out for max Q, confirmation that we've just passed through max Q. Coming up in about a minute, we will have 3 events in rapid succession. The first of which being main engine cutoff, or what we call MECO. This is where all 9 of our M1D engines shut off and slow the vehicle down for the following event, which is stage separation. And that's when the first stage separates from the second stage. And then finally, the lighting of our second stage MVAC engine, which we call SES1, or second engine start 1. Now, if you've been following our Starlink missions, you know that we've reduced the number of burns on the second stage for these missions from 2 burns down to just 1 single burn. This allows the second stage to provide 70% of the velocity needed for this mission, which allows the first stage to use less fuel and thus making first stage recovery much easier. So today we will again only be doing 1 burn of that second stage engine. Again, coming up in about 10 seconds are those 3 events: MECO, stage separation, and SES1.
MECO 1. Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition.
And there we've just had MECO and stage separation. That stage separation confirms the successful 5th use of our first stage booster. And you can see on your right screen that second stage MVAC engine lighting up and taking that second stage to its targeted orbit. And we're just a few seconds away from fairing deploy. Again, this fairing was used once before on a very first Starlink mission. And there is the visual confirmation of fairing deploy. So this means that we've successfully reused this fairing. So now let's see if Miss Tree and Miss Chief can catch those fairing halves today. We likely won't have that live view since fairing touchdown will happen past the conclusion of this morning's webcast, but stay tuned to our social media for updates later this morning.
Stage 2 is on a nominal trajectory.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
For those of you just joining us, good morning and welcome. We just had a successful liftoff of our Falcon 9 about 4 minutes ago. There's a lot going on right now. On the right-hand side of your screen, our second stage. Its Merlin vacuum engine is currently burning and will continue to do so for a few minutes. It's carrying 60 Starlink satellites for eventual payload deploy. But we're going to focus the next few minutes on the left-hand side of the screen with our first stage. Currently right now, after stage separation, that first stage is boosting, still gliding up without any engine power. It's hitting apogee just about now, And for the next few seconds, it's going to start to free fall down to the Earth's surface for an attempted first stage recovery on our drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. As our first stage reorients itself, we're going to prepare for the first of 2 engine burns on that first stage to aid our recovery, the first of which is coming up in about 90 seconds. It's known as our entry burn. We fire 3 of the 9 Merlin engines in the opposite direction the way we're heading. We do this in order to slow down the vehicle about 25% before we hit the dense part of the atmosphere. Not performing this burn would put unnecessary strain on our first stage. We're just at about T plus 6 minutes. We're a little more than 45 seconds away from that engine burn. It only lasts about 10 seconds. And although our first stage only takes a few minutes to get from its apogee down to the Earth's surface, our 2 fairing halves takes much longer. Please stay posted with our social media for updates on those recoveries. We're about 15 seconds away from that entry burn. We're going to wait for that visual confirmation the burn started and call out that that engine burn was successful.
Stage 1
entry
FTS
burn
is
startup.
safe.
Stage 2 continues to follow a nominal trajectory.
Stage 1, entry burn shut down.
Our entry burn has just completed. The next step is our landing burn. It's about 90 seconds from now. In terms of velocity reduction, with the remaining velocity, the denser part of the atmosphere actually slows our Falcon 9 by 80%, and the landing burn achieves just that last bit of reduction down to 0. And although we're focused on first stage recovery at the moment, at T plus 9 minutes, a little bit less than that, our second stage, its engine will cut off. We'll then confirm it's in good orbit, and we'll then begin the preparations for payload deploy.
Starting terminal guidance.
We're about 10 seconds away from that landing burn call out. We'll sit tight and see if we can get any feed of that event.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
We're still waiting on call-out and confirmation for that first stage, but that's our secondary mission. Right now we'll focus on our primary mission with that second stage and our Starlink satellites. We're waiting for that confirmation of second engine cutoff.
We have Seco 1.
Our cutoff has completed. We're now waiting for confirmation of good orbit before we begin payload deploy.
Expected loss of signal.
So we've achieved
Cape.
that good orbit for our
Expected
second
acquisition
stage,
of signal,
but we're not in the right
Newfoundland.
position in that orbit yet. Second stage is now going to coast in this orbit for a few minutes. During this time,
Orbital
you're going to
insertion
see
is
the second stage is going to start to spin along its central axis. This gives the Starlink satellites the momentum they need to space themselves out over time after they deploy. Think of it as if you were hanging on the edge of a merry-go-round and you jumped off and it slings you out. We use this natural deployment and it prevents us from having to install complex and heavy separation mechanisms on each and every satellite. So while we wait for that position to be achieved, we're going to take a quick break and we'll return at T plus 13 minutes 45 seconds.
Welcome back to the webcast for Starlink. We had an on-time liftoff this morning at 8:16 a.m. Eastern Time. Our first stage successfully separated from the second stage, but unfortunately we did get confirmation that we were not able to land that first stage today. We are obviously disappointed, but our primary mission on second stage is still on target to drop our Starlink satellites to their deployment orbit. One quick update, as many of you know, we've been running a number of tests to reduce the reflectivity of these Starlink satellites on their way to orbit. The first of these tests involve using paint to darken portions of the satellite. Preliminary results show a notable reduction, but we have a couple other ideas that we think could reduce the reflectivity even further. The most promising being a sunshade that would operate in the same way as a patio umbrella or a sun visor, but for the satellite. The sunshade option is slated for a future Starlink launch, and all of these efforts are ongoing and will continue to report results back as we receive them. We're now coming up on deployment of our Starlink satellites, so let's listen in for that call out. We should be able to see separation live, so we'll wait for that live view.
Payload separation confirmed.
So we did get confirmation of deployment, and there is that live view. So you can see on your screen the satellites are slowly separating away from the second stage, and over the next few weeks they will distance themselves from each other and eventually use their onboard ion thrusters to make their way to their final orbit.
And with that successful deployment, that brings our webcast to a close for today. To recap our mission, we had a successful liftoff of Falcon 9 from Kennedy Space Center at 8:16 a.m. Eastern Time. We had a successful separation of that first stage from the second stage. Unfortunately, we did not recover that first stage for another launch, but as you can see, 60 healthy and operational Starlink satellites are on their way to their intended orbits. It's definitely been an exciting launch today. We want to thank the 45th Space Wing for range safety and the FAA for licensing today's launch. And we'd also like to thank you, all of our viewers, for tuning in. Please follow our website and social media platforms for updates on our next missions and milestones. Until the next time, please take care and have a great day.